What's next for Manchester United? I know focus will be outgoings, but what about the strikers? Because we heard a story from Sam Reports yesterday of the potential of Benjamin Sesko potentially becoming a Man United player, being open to the idea of it. Any updates, any new news on that you could share with the Football Terrace community?
Yeah, I smiled because that story for Gimme Sport, who I work for, came out after my own reporting, which was that Sesko might still be one to watch for Manchester United, only because they'd looked at the player 12 months ago. Challenge is that Arsenal couldn't get that price down from 83 million plus to 70 million or so. And unless Leipzig dropped the price, Manchester United wouldn't be able to advance on that. But there is a possibility that Sesko wants to move to the Premier League. Doesn't look like he's going to get Arsenal now because of the Victor Gyökeres situation. And therefore, Manchester United and even potentially Chelsea could be ones to watch for Sesko. I say Chelsea very cautiously because they categorically ruled out Sesko because Nicholas Jackson and Liam Delap are too similar. So as of now, with Jackson at the club, Sesko and Chelsea won't move. But the doors maybe just slightly open a fraction, simply because if Jackson departs, Chelsea will have to then decide, are we going to go for a more Morgan Rogers type profile, a Garnacho type profile, or a traditional number 9? And it will be informed by whether both Nkunku and Jackson leave or just one of them. And I think Chelsea's attack-minded targets are going to be quite fluid. And we're not going to hear a consistency yet in what the profile is they're really looking for, because João Pedro can play 9 or in a more versatile position. And at the moment, they've got 3 9s in Nicholas Jackson, Liam Delap and Mark Guiu, although the latter might be loaned with Ipswich, very interested. If Jackson and Nkunku go, they've pulled out one of their traditional 9s. They've also pulled out a more versatile player in Nkunku, but they have João Pedro, they have Esteval Willian, they have Jamie Gittins. So it's hard to understand the direction of travel for Chelsea at the moment, simply because if they bring in Garnacho, they've got Gittins, but they may think 2 on that left-hand side with Tyreek George out on loan is fine, and then Giovanni Quenda arriving in a year's time. If they bring in a more central player for Nkunku, where's João Pedro going to play? If Jackson departs, does that mean that the 9s become João Pedro and Liam Delap? It's pretty fluid. And then naturally with Morgan Rogers, Villa think that he's untouchable, but Chelsea definitely have an appreciation there. With Man United coming back to the list of targets, yes, Sesko could develop, but it hasn't yet. But he's definitely been on their list and for quite some time. There is still a possibility that Ollie Watkins comes into the fray as well, depending on Villa's price and perspective. He's been discussed internally. Dominic Calvert-Lewin has been oversold a bit because, a bit like Emi Martinez, it's the player side courting Manchester United and not the other way around. Alexander Mitrovic, as I broke, is a name discussed. This would be later in the window and possibly just a loan, in the same way that John Duran was offered to Manchester United. I don't think it would be in place of a younger and more long-term option. But if Rasmus Højlund, for example, was to depart, they might look to get in a young lead striker, and they still might see opportunism in doing something late in the window. So Mitrovic is on the back burner, but Manchester United are aware that if Al Hilal bring in a striker, there could be a scenario where Mitrovic becomes available, at least on a loan. So that still might be one to watch towards the end of the window. But the priority, I think, will be different attackers for now. And then we'll see where they're at, maybe with 2 weeks of the window remaining. And Nicholas Jackson is the other name that is appreciated internally, as is Christopher Nkunku at Manchester United. So that will be a really interesting one, because logically, even though 2 + 2 usually makes 2 million rather than 4 in a transfer window, if Man United approach Chelsea over Nicholas Jackson, some will say that Garnacho will come up and maybe 2 separate deals will suit both clubs. It's a neat narrative. We're not there yet, but it is true that Jackson is one of the names that Manchester United are discussing. And now they've got Mbeumo over the line, they can turn their focus into clarifying that list and making a move in the market.
How about goalkeepers? Because I know you mentioned Emi Martinez kind of offering himself to the club. There was a link, I read a story that I feel is relatively exclusive to, if not completely exclusive to you. The Antwerp goalkeeper has been linked to Man United. Is that an area that you think maybe later in the window? Because you've got this weird thing with Onana. He's out injured for ages. Now it isn't so bad. I can't lie, just as a fan theory, it all smells a bit fishy, if I'm being honest. But a new goalkeeper still seems to be high on the agenda.
Yeah, it always was on the agenda, though, as I've reported before.
Yep.
You had option one, the long-standing plan to bring in a young number two that could compete, but not necessarily assume the number one immediately. And that was with a view to Bayern likely departing, who's become a bit of a cult hero in many ways at Manchester United. But both Onana and Bayern are currently at the club. So if Manchester United stick to their original strategy, it will be a young profile, more a number two. Some of the names they liked, as we've discussed on previous shows, just didn't want to be number twos. But Manchester United had a genuine interest in Jordi Petrovic and had also looked at Joan Garcia. Each of them felt ready to make the step up to be a number one or close. Garcia got his move to Barcelona. Petrovic is going to be the number one at Bournemouth. So it's difficult with goalkeepers because naturally you want someone that's kind of ready to be a number one, but maybe you want to keep them as a number two for a little bit. And not that many goalkeepers at that level are prepared to come into a big club and take on that role because they back themselves for minutes elsewhere. So James Trafford is also appreciated by Man United, but Newcastle can likely say you're the number one immediately or you're the number one very soon. With Onana at the football club, maybe Manchester United can't quite make the same instant guarantees. So you have to go a little bit younger and back somebody to develop and be patient. Sene Lammens is certainly a name on United's radar. They've held some initial talks only on the player side at the moment this summer, and the interest dates back to January. If they pivot, and it would be a pivot, and go for a number one, it's because whilst Onana is injured, they hold talks with the player and they decide that they want to move in a different direction, but they'd have to get Onana out of the club and then be moving for a number one. And none of that is moving at the moment. The focus is on the rehabilitation. And Onana's not actually been told he's surplus to requirements anyway. So people will say if they sign a young goalkeeper, why do you not get an instant established number one? That was never the plan. If they do that, it means they've changed their mind about Onana. And the first thing they'll have to do, if that's the case, is communicate it to Onana. And they haven't. With Emi Martinez, I'll come back to what I said before. And a lot of Villa fans have sort of clamored around this and said, hang on a minute, this is all just being driven. It's all just being pushed. We're going to keep Emi Martinez. Once again, I repeat what I've always said. Emi Martinez has indicated he's keen on Manchester United. And that part gets pulled out and out of context put on social media. Never once have I said Man United have opened talks, Man United have placed a bid, Man United have focused on Emi Martinez. I've always said Man United would only focus on Emi Martinez if Onana leaves, and the communication has not been given to Onana. So this is Emi Martinez courting Manchester United at the moment anyway, more than Manchester United courting Emi Martinez. And Villa fans irked by the link might want to start asking Emi Martinez why he's pushing for a potential move to Manchester United rather than assuming from the journalist's point of view that we're just fueling this without any substance. And I repeat again what I said before, that it is Emi Martinez pitching, saying he's open to Manchester United. Manchester United are unmoved at this stage because they either are going to persist with Onana or they haven't yet made a determination on it. So it could be a case the number one goalkeeper situation at Manchester United becomes a topic of conversation later in the window. But for now, Manchester United's position hasn't really changed. They're sticking with Onana, even though he's injured, at least as of today. And then as a consequence, they continue to profile a younger kind of goalkeeper that can come in as a number two.
Comprehensive update there as ever. And I mean, I've seen a lot of yourself and your colleagues this summer. It's been the worst summer for it I've seen. So many of you are supposedly taking brown envelopes from Liverpool to push certain narratives about Isak, brown envelopes from Man United to push certain narratives about Emi Martinez. It's kind of funny. And then the things they say that you've said are not even true. And it's like this in Mbumo deal we've just been talking about. For weeks, I've said, look, you know, the base price that Brentford wanted. I remember hearing you say this on the United stand. I remember the first tweet Fabrizio put out about it was sort of 70 million was this. I think you said 70 million was like high end what they wanted. I think Fabrizio's words were Brentford on a base of that. And for months, it was like, no, they're just lying and saying that to make Man United look better if they get the deal cheaper. And then we end up paying it with add-ons I can't believe we've folded and paid Brentford what they want. But you said that wasn't what they wanted. You said it was a lie. It's all a bit strange. The online world is a little bit strange, Ben. I can't lie. The online world is a bit strange.
But
it's
also,
a bit strange.
The thing about these fees is payment terms and structure again. So there would have been a way of doing Mbumo for under 70 million with a different structure, obviously. So if the deal is 4 payment terms, naturally, if you're offering 1 payment term, you're going to get the overall package down. So it's not really about the number. People want to have a fixed number in their head because they feel when that number's been hit, the deal is definitely going to happen. But the goalpost can move. It's no good whatsoever even offering 100 million for Brian and Mbumo if you want it paid in 100 installments. They'd much rather take a deal at 55 million in 1 installment. And I still think there's a profound lack of understanding because people don't want the context, and because what I'm saying doesn't make a neat social media post.
Ben, people want to live. Sorry to interject. I'm so sorry, mate, but people live in the net spend world, and net spend isn't real in that basic sense that it's made. As you've just said, you could offer Brentford £150 million for Mbumo, but say we're paying it in 20 installments over 20 years. They are less likely to say yes to that. Yes, they can show it as 150 million on their accounts year one. It will look great. But there comes a point when they need the physical cash, and to spread it over 20 years is almost futile. And I know that's an extreme example, but as you say, it proves the point. City back in the 8-9 years ago, they were getting a lot of players in at 50 and 60 millions, less than everyone else, because they were offering cash. They were offering straight money up front, so they got the players cheaper. But people pick and choose when they want to understand this, because I think banter plays a big part, mate.
But I think also you have to understand that with the payment terms, a club will often request through their own kind of credit facilities a upfront payment of the fee. So they have the cash flow and then they'll continue to pay it off. But you have to be able to show that you can underwrite that. And it's difficult sometimes, particularly when you're actually dealing with foreign transfers or Saudi. I know a lot of clubs that have done big deals to Saudi and then have had it paid in, let's just say, 5 installments, and have gone and have taken the fee up front in one lump sum, but then have had to show that the actual club that they have sold the player to can underwrite that and can prove that they are going to follow through at their end, because somebody still has to pay back that holding company, and it usually is going to be the club that's bought the player. In other words, if you do a deal directly club to club, then you can go to a third party, you can persuade them to give you all of the money up front, and then your club that are buying the player may pay the same installments agreed, not to you directly, but to a third party. And I know that this was definitely the case also with the Bradley Barcola deal, which helped Lyon, where PSG helped facilitate an underwriting of that deal to help Lyon, which ultimately has been beneficial to keeping them up in the league. There was an advance on the whole transfer fee, and now PSG are working with Lyon to underwrite and facilitate the month by month or the year by year payment terms. So there are workarounds and ways of getting the cash flow. And again, I know we're going into micro detail here, but I think it's important that people understand that the final number is nothing without the structure of a deal.
Fair. Viewers, make sure you've hit the like button. Make sure you are subscribing. Make sure you've got all of that done. Moving on from Manchester, we've got some